there's a point at which people reach a level of financial success where they're in control of their time and they're making enough that they are comfortable and their family is comfortable, whether like there's no number where it's worth giving up. They've almost detached themselves from the idea of wanting money and wanting more.
There's an entire generation of Americans who no longer care about prestige, titles, work travel, fancy offices, and lunches. Welcome to Mundane Millionaires, a podcast for this generation of small business owners who want to set their ego aside and focus on what matters: family, community, quality of life, and cash flows. In each episode, Eric Pacifici and Kevin Henderson uncover what it takes to get a little money in the bank, control your time, and invest in building great families and lives. Let's get started.
Welcome to another episode of Mundane Millionaires. Kevin, we had Sean O'Dowd on the pod, and it was fun. He's an interesting guy. He's a consultant.
Yeah, such a fascinating path to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
A lot of times in our world, we think about path to entrepreneurship being go buy a business, right? Which is already a little atypical. I think the average person that thinks path to entrepreneurship, like you go start a business, right? You start a store, you start a restaurant. So we're already even a little atypical of like, hey, there's a different way you could go buy a business. And then you got Sean that's like, hey, there's a different way you could quit your job and literally just start consulting with the skills you have and make an incredible living. It's such a fascinating idea and story.
And to be honest with you, I had seen him in a number of different forums on YouTube and on Twitter talking about this idea that I'm gonna quit my job tomorrow. I'm gonna make $5,000 by the end of the month. And I thought, no way. You're out of touch. You're a Boston Consulting Group alumni consultant. Like, yeah, for sure you're gonna be able to do that. But could I do that? Could Joe Main Street do that? And I think we pushed him pretty hard on it, and I think he got really specific and concrete. And towards the end, I started thinking, hey, maybe I'll leave the law firm and go do some consulting.
Whoa, easy there, Turbo. But no, like I take your point because it makes the use case so ubiquitous, right? And we talked about that. Like, well, like you said, we pushed a little bit harder, right? Like, okay, easy for the Wharton or Harvard or Stanford MBA that's been working at McKinsey to say like, yeah, just quit your job and go consult. But what about that guy next door, right? That's been working mid-level management at some corporate job, that's been a skilled tradesman, that's been a stay-at-home mom or dad, whatever. And his response was just so eye-opening of like, a lot of things that people will hire these outside consultants on are things that aren't otherwise ordinarily going to get done because they don't have time and bandwidth. Yeah. So if they can pay someone to do it and make a return greater than what they paid someone to do it, it's a no-brainer. Right. And anyone has skills that someone will pay for when you put it in those terms. And it's just totally mind-blowing, eye-opening. Very eye-opening.
Yeah, I loved when he talked about, getting that first job, because, you go out, like his mom was a librarian, and he spun her up a consultancy and she's making great money. And, but I'm an M&A attorney. Could I go do that? How would I get that first job? And so it was cool to hear him kind of drill down on the strategy a little bit.
And also a good reminder that like entrepreneurship also isn't always the most glamorous thing either, right? Because his point there was like, you got to get the reps, and it may not be the coolest job. It's not going to be the most high paying job, right? And we talk about this in entrepreneurship all the time. Like if you're going to be CEO of a commercial cleaning company, like at some point you're going to be on site in a client's place at 10 o'clock at night scrubbing toilets. Like you just are. That's part of entrepreneurship. And it was so interesting to hear kind of that same variation of that message in the consulting world of like, you got to be willing to put in the dues. You got to get that first job. You got to get those first reviews. And it may not be the coolest, like most sophisticated, high paying consulting gig, but as you start to get those reps and build your business, right, the possibilities are limitless, really. Limited only by time, right?
Yeah. Well, the guy riding in his car to work that is looking for something different out of life, we've got something special for you on this one. So hope everybody enjoys.
Absolutely. Enjoy, guys.
So Sean, where do you live? Is Chicago home?
Yeah, so I'm in Chicago. I say Chicago. It's really Chicago suburbs. I have the 2 kids, so we left downtown because downtown Chicago can be not super friendly for the young kids. So we're about 30, 40 minutes north of the city right now.
Oh, sweet.
Okay. So
Yeah,
are you a city guy or a suburbs guy? I know this is hotly debated.
I go back and forth. I like the city because just stuff to do, but the suburbs are nice for the 3-4 months a year when Chicago is not covered in snow. I live in the area where, if you've seen Home Alone, I live in the town where Home Alone was filmed. So the actual house is not that far away. So it's quiet. There's trees. It's a nice spot to walk around and do stuff outside with the kids, which can't really complain from there.
So it's true. Yeah, it's true. So I grew up in Michigan, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Kevin went to school at Michigan too. So you spent 3 years in Ann Arbor and Michigan. So I always joke that the Midwest is amazing in the summertime, but those 5 days, they go by fast because it is hit or miss, but it's a cool place.
Are you born and raised Chicago or you're just leftover refuge from a corporate life or what?
So it's a crazy story. So but by the time I went to college, I had moved 22 times. So yeah,
22.
Right? So 22. So I was born in the Chicago area. I was born in Evanston. It's where Northwestern is for college football fans. So I was born in Evanston the day that Northwestern football knocked off the Michigan Wolverines at home, nationally ranked team, whatever. So my Northwestern alumni, huge football fan, grandfather took it as a sign that I was going to be Northwestern's first Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. Didn't happen. But I moved every single year of my life growing up, and then ended up in Chicago after graduation, working at a big consulting firm, and then ended up marrying a girl who we live in her now hometown that she lived her entire life in. So we're here and probably here for a while, but the warm weather calls me. You guys are doing it right. You guys have the warm weather going on.
Yeah. We are doing it right. I'm not going to argue with you, Sean. We actually last year, we bought a little lake house. Our family has owned some lake houses for 70 years in a part of Michigan. So we're trying to split the difference, actually kind of capture those 5 days, but then also be in Florida the rest of the year. So I feel like Michigan football, Kevin, just as an aside, Michigan football has more stories of them losing games they shouldn't lose than they have stories of actually winning games. You notice that?
Only to non-Michigan fans.
Yeah.
We have plenty of fantastic game stories, but everyone else has, you remember that one time? Yeah.
Appalachia State, man. That was a great game.
Yes.
Dude, and last year, who was it that App State, was it A&M last year? Again, I was like, holy shit, with App State, what's going on here? They're like the ringer team every few years.
If you want a heartbreak
that was
story,
brutal. That was my I think that was my first year of law school, or maybe second. I don't remember exactly. And I was going to the Michigan Wolverines, right? And then I see this team dismantling before my eyes. I was like, holy shit. I brought all the bad luck. As a
bad juju. It's your fault.
As a previous BYU football fan who had their heyday, 30 years ago, football luck has not followed me all that much.
Yeah. Sean, are you a football fan?
Huge football fan. Okay. Although, so my college football team, I'm born into a family of Northwestern Wildcats. So I get the really fun every 20-year 10-win season, and then everything else is just miserable. Although we did have a player transfer from Michigan to Northwestern yesterday. Would be one of Northwestern's best recruits ever. So we have.
I love that you follow Northwestern football recruiting. That's legitimate devotion. That's pretty cool.
You're ahead of me.
So Sean, you post constantly. This is actually something that I love about you, and I notice, I wouldn't say constantly. You post regularly about Hawaii. And I love Hawaii. We went on, Kevin doesn't know this, but I was a first-year associate. Kevin and I met at a large law firm. I was a first-year associate. Kevin was a senior associate. I took my first trip to Hawaii that year, Kevin, and legitimately, I almost didn't come back. And when I did, we went to Maui. When I did, I was clinically depressed for like 30 days. Like I watched the movie Moana like 5 times. That's how sad I was. So I love Hawaii, and you do too. And tell me about that. Do you guys travel there often, or what's the thing with Hawaii?
So Hawaii's interesting because it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but it's also interestingly like located geographically for us. Because like I've got family here in the States. My wife is Thai, so she's got family over in Thailand, and her parents are here in the States now. But who knows? Like there's a world where they move back to Thailand at some point. So like it actually is really interestingly located from a geographic perspective for us. Of course, it's beautiful and amazing and like great the quality of life and all of that. But like if her family's in Thailand and my family's here in the States, like split the difference and you live in Hawaii, like it's not that bad of a deal.
This feels like a sales pitch you make to your wife regularly. Like that was like well-worn. That was a well-worn path. So are you a consultant right now, Sean? How did you get to the consulting? Talk about the consulting thing.
Yeah, so the consulting thing. So I finished school and was a consultant for a big firm. So I worked for BCG, Boston Consulting Group. It's one of the big ones. That's actually where I met my wife. And I left, joined a startup in Chicago as employee 40. Terrible decision. It was a good people, good startup. Terrible decision on my part. I had 3 offers from startups when I left BCG because I knew I was going to go work in a startup. I picked the only one of the 3 to not become a unicorn billion-dollar company. And one of them I was offered. The guy had the offer to be employee number 3, so it was a ton of equity. So like, ouch.
So you'd be in Hawaii right now.
I would be in Hawaii. I would be done.
You'd own
done
Lanai. You would have bought it from the Oracle dude. You know, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So all of those Hawaii posts are just like self-loathing of the screw up there.
Are you fully remote, or what's your day-to-day look like?
I'm fully remote. So I'm an independent consultant now. I've had some clients ask me to travel, and my answer has been like, "Hey, I really don't want to. I've got 2 young kids at home." And then the other answer is like, "Yeah, you know what? Okay, cool. Like we can do this remote, and hey, like it'll cost us $2-3 to fly you out every single week between hotels and flights and everything. Like if you don't want to travel and we can save that, then sure, done deal." So I've actually never had to go to a client site in an independent capacity, which is amazing. Including I've got a big client that's in downtown Chicago, big Fortune 500, and one of the few Fortune 500s left in downtown Chicago. Like I haven't even taken the train down to their offices.
Not even locally.
Yeah. Not even locally.
So you obviously started your career in consulting, but you know, big consulting is night and day different, right? It's similar to law, right? Go to big law versus hang a shingle, you know, pretty diametrically opposed. Was your shift, and I certainly don't mean this disrespectfully, but I know the way some people think, right? That like, oh, you go become an independent consultant because like, what, you know, you walked away from this job, like what else are you going to do? You know, whatever. Was it sort of happenstance in the way your career evolved, or have you always been entrepreneurial minded and kind of made a strategic shift for, I want to walk my career towards eventually being independent?
It's the latter to some extent. So I didn't know that I wanted to be an independent consultant, but I knew I wanted to do something entrepreneurial. So like the exact story was I started at my past consulting firm. My first day of training, the guy who was doing the training was talking about how like the coolest thing of his entire life, and it was amazing and blah, 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 is Obama referenced some of his work, not him by name, but some of his work during the State of the Union. And he was like, and the State of the Union draft, like there's a footnote and you can see my name in the footnote if you turn to page like 600. And he's like, this is the coolest thing ever. And I was like, I really don't want to be a footnote, and someone else's speech is like the coolest thing in my life. And like literally that day in training, first day, I was like, this is going to be great for a couple of years, but I'm not staying forever. But I thought I was going to go down the venture back path. So like, that's why I joined the startup in Chicago and was looking at the other ones. And then one thing kind of led to another where now I'm an independent consultant.
And your big thing on the independent consultancy is this is doable by anybody, right? Like you've got, well, and I guess I shouldn't say anybody, but anybody with like a unique technical or some sort of, some sort of niche skill set, you can spin it up and you can consult. Is that true?
Yeah. That's the thing that I think it's the biggest misconception when I speak with people, because when people spin up shingle, like, you guys are lawyers, like, you literally went to school and passed several tests that allow you to do what you do. It's different on the independent consulting side. Like, the example I always give is my mom. My mom's awesome, but she's a librarian. She didn't go to Harvard Business School. She didn't do anything like this. I literally helped my mom start up a consulting business as a librarian, and she consulted on librarian-esque things to a company. And her first client liked her so much they gave her a full-time job offer, so she took it. So she's now she got a job out of it, and it's cool. But again, it's like totally different. Like, how many hours do you think you guys spend in the law school library studying this stuff to go off and start your own shingle, right?
Yeah,
a lot. I want them back, as a matter of fact, Sean, that you bring it up. Yeah, go ahead.
And it's such an interesting, like, your mom's story is so interesting to me, because I feel like, and I don't want to like overly focus on consulting, but I feel like it is such a unique opportunity to use even as a stepping stone, right? Mm-hmm. You know, you talk about career transition, you talk about the people in the car right now, you know, driving home at 8:30 p.m. from like a job they hate, that are like, how the hell am I going to get out of here? But they're not sitting on $1 million to be able to like quit their job and go find the next thing. It feels like consulting is such a unique, even if you don't think you want to be an independent consultant forever, it seems like such a great stepping stone to kind of get more reps, get in more doors, meet more people. And then, like your mom, you know, I mean, she hit the home run on consulting gig 1, but even if it's consulting gig 22, you know, you land with your feet on the ground at a place you love. I mean, do you see that with your clients, or your clients mostly, you know, when I say clients, I'm talking about your content-based stuff where you're talking to people about becoming consultants and things. Do you see that? Is it stepping stone, or is it more like, I want to fully transition to this? Or
so I don't really have I don't like charge people really, or do anything like that to help people.
Well, clients is the wrong word. Yeah. Okay.
But you know, I know what you mean. Like, for everyone, it's basically a stepping stone, because
so you're just time out. So Sean, you're just giving this information out for free. Like, you don't even have a consultant practice, if that makes sense.
I don't. So I used to have like you can book a Calendly call with me, and then I had like 80 people book it, and I was like, okay, I can't do that. So then I put a price on it, and then like 50 people booked it, and then I was like, this is still taking up too much time. So I actually even got rid of that. So I have no monetization. So
you're just doing this because you're like, hey, I am passionate about this. It's been meaningful in my life and kind of given me some, you know, different quality of life, and so I'm just going to gratuitously share it and kind of see what happens.
Yeah, so I'll tell you exactly what I want to do, which is there's so people who are driving their car hate this. They want to start getting some money. They want to start making income quickly. Like, the best way to do that in consulting is Upwork. What I want to do is I want to teach people and get people going on Upwork. And then there's a web scraper that you can run that scrapes Upwork profiles, that scrapes the income somebody has made, because that's actually technically publicly posted if you use the scraper. Anyways, I want to run the scraper across everyone who I've spoken with, helped them get started, whatever, and have a return back $100 million. Like, I want to see that people I helped made $100 million on Upwork consulting, which would be, that's the goal. Amazing. That's cool. What I'm trying to do.
So let's game this out. So I think you tweeted today that you believe that someone could make $5,000 by the end of the month consulting through Upwork. Walk us through concretely what that looks like.
Yeah. So this is exactly what I did, where I wasn't driving my car. I was walking home, but hated what I was doing, and I needed money. I was in debt. So like, shit, I got to make some money.
What were you doing at the time?
So I was working at that startup. I was doing strategy and operations for them. I was bored and I needed money. So I was like, all right, I'm going to start doing this. So Upwork was where I went, and it's basically a matching platform of like jobs that are available and people who want to do consulting jobs. And you can go online, create a profile in 5 minutes, and start pitching on jobs. And you don't need crazy specific. There's like 198 different categories of jobs. Like, everybody who's listening to this is qualified for one of those 198 categories.
Everybody.
There's literally everything. Like, there's job postings for like, if you want to build like an AI language model, which I'm sure a very small subset of people are available can do. But there's things like online research, like general virtual assistants. Like there is there's a spectrum of easy to hard stuff. But you go on, create an account and start pitching. And there's strategy to pitching and how to get the right projects and that sort of thing. But you start pitching on projects, clients say, like your pitch, and then hire you. And you'll make a couple bucks, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you get a review score. And it's like, wow, this person's got, it's out of 100% of scale. So it's like, this person's 100% review score. I can charge a little bit more because they got good reviews. And then they do another project with a little bit more money. And then they do another project with more money. And then they increase prices again. And
is it hard to get that first project? Do you have a supply and demand issue? Or
it's different.
How do you get job number one?
Job number one is the hardest job to get by far because you don't have reviews. So and you're competing against people who do have reviews. So there's no incentive for a client to hire you if you don't have reviews because they're taking a risk on you when they could get a sure commodity in someone else. That's why you probably don't want to go to the restaurant with 0 reviews compared to the restaurant that does have reviews. Right. So you need to work your way around it. You need to find a way to get a job where reviews don't matter. And the way that I found that works best and what I did was if you look for jobs that have a keyword like immediately, ASAP, urgent, today, something like that in the description.
Interesting.
Because
use time to your advantage.
Exactly. Because that person doesn't care about reviews. That person needs someone ASAP.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So be the first person to apply. You get that job. Great. Do a great job.
You got to crush that first one.
You got to crush it. You got to crush the first one. You got to crush the second one. Get good reviews. But then suddenly you've got 5-star reviews and you can go bid on a project that's paying $3-4 grand and it's pretty easy for you to do.
So,
and it's, sorry to cut you off, Eric. Is the ramp up that, and we're going deep on strategy here, is the ramp up that quick? I mean, you get your first 5-star review and you're immediately elevating. Because I was curious about this, watching some of your content. I was so fascinated by the theory of stop trying to compete with the guys with 38 reviews. If you're brand new, you got to go down and take that $500 engagement or whatever. Uh-huh. Is it literally like that first one, the 5-star review, all of a sudden, or is there a longer ramp up of doing multiple and slowly incrementing until you're up there with those top tier guys bidding for the big deals?
Yeah, it's very, very, very flat. And then your profile review score hits and then it scales up dramatically. What I mean by profile is you get a review at the end of each project. And then after you've done, and it's an algorithm that's a black boxy, so it's different for every person. After you've done about 5 projects and you've got 100% review projects, then you get a profile review score where it's Kevin is a 100% person because all of his reviews are 5 stars. Once you get that profile review score, that's where things skyrocket. So I think you're talking about the Alex video I made. I worked with a guy who went from 0 to 100 grand made in 50 days.
Precisely.
So he won 3 of his first 26 projects. So bid on 26, got 3 of the first 26, which is about normal, hit the review score. And then he made 15 grand the next week. And then he made 15 grand the week after that. And then the week after that. And then suddenly before long is at 100 grand.
So Sean, I'm driving home from work right now. It's Friday. I'm going to have some pizza. And then I'm
nice.
I'm changing my life because I'm sick. I'm not doing another week like I just did. How quickly does this?
Wait, Eric, let's talk about that.
We skipped over a really key part there.
Sorry, this is a straw man. This isn't actually
I'm talking
Eric.
In generalities. So that's wink, wink, Sean. Text me
after. Because everyone's eating
this.
pizza on Friday, right?
Yeah, we're having a pizza pie, and then I am leaving the partnership. But seriously, so I am, I'm Joe Main Street. I'm driving home today. I need to make a change. I'm exhausted. I want to find some flexibility in life. I want to be able to work remotely so that I can live wherever I want, move closer to the in-laws, move to Hawaii, whatever, and still make a good living, but have something different. What do I need to get going? How quickly does this happen? I'm asking a multifaceted question here because I've got a million of them. How quickly can this get going? Is this something where I can take a job tonight on Friday night and be done by Monday? Or can this be done part-time, or is it going to interfere with my day-to-day? How do we get that ball rolling?
Yeah. So the rule of thumb that I think about is when you get started, create your account, the goal is 50 pitches in 5 days, your first 5 days. If you get those 50 pitches done based off like conversion rates and all of that, you should win enough projects that will allow you to get that profile review score. At that point, things can skyrocket.
So could you quit your job at that point? 5 jobs, you've got the profile score. Are you realistically going to be making enough money as a, average, let's say 100K a year American to quit your job?
You
Hell of an average, Eric.
Well,
Yeah.
you don't. That's not the average.
Yeah.
You know what I mean.
2x right there. 2x.
That's like the two. That's the 2 household average, I think.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I'm just messing. I get it.
So if you really wanted to, you probably could. I wouldn't recommend that. So like my exact trajectory, right, is when I got started with this, like month 1 for me was like $3,000 because I was screwing around and I couldn't figure out the immediate thing. I hadn't figured it out yet. So
interesting.
Month number 1 for me was like $3,000. Month number 2 was also like $3,000. Right, because I was trying everything. I couldn't figure it out.
And are you working at that time?
So that's me side hustling. $3,000.
Okay.
Month 4 side hustling was like $12,000 side hustling. Month 5 was like $40,000 side hustling, and then it stuck there throughout. So year 1 was 500 total bottom line, which is very close to top line because bottom line and there's cost is minimal in this business.
Yeah, a few software platforms and a computer.
Exactly. Which I'm sure you guys don't have a lot of like inventory turns either or overhead or anything like that.
We don't. Like we're like, moving over to the law firm. I mean, we don't talk about those numbers because like it would blow people's minds, the profitability in a remote law firm.
That's awesome.
If you're kind of tech enabled and forward thinking,
it's been a little bit more expensive to keep Kevin supplied with bourbon to keep him going than I thought it was going to be originally. But other than
that's where the office expense goes to the bourbon.
I didn't even think about, so with the podcast, I mean, this is a business expense, Eric.
I think it is. I think the entire shelf behind you. Yeah, between pizza delivery and bourbon and drizzly delivery, our margins are not as juicy as we thought they were going to be, but we're getting by. So let's just get to the elephant in the room, man. I have now gotten through the initial phase. I've got 25-star reviews. How much money? What's the ceiling? How much money can I realistically make here?
Yeah, so it scales really fast, right? Because it's basically scaling based off of your time and your time individually. So you can get to 300 to 500 grand in your first year, no problem, because as long as your capacity is utilized, then you can get there, no problem. The trade-off that comes out from that is it is very hard to scale from 300 or 500 a year. Like that's you'll be exactly. So like you reach your max in less than a year, but that max is basically flat, which is why a lot of independent consultants jump over to this game for 5 to 10 years. They get a big bump in income. They get some basics going regarding like how to run a business. They're figuring out liability insurance and their LLC and all sorts of garbage. And then what most independent consultants do is they leave 5 to 10 years later with $1 million, $2 million in the bank. They go see you guys to buy a business. They take a job as like a VP of a medium-sized business somewhere, something like that. So it's a high paying career accelerator, but for very few is it a long-term career path.
Yeah.
So you're telling me I am a librarian and I can spin up an Upwork, and within a year or two I could be making 300 to 500 grand. Within 5 years I could have $1 million in the bank, depending on how I budget. And then after that I'm investing, your thing is cash flowing real estate, which was fantastic until about a year ago. So that's fascinating. What about let's use Kevin and I as a very concrete example. Could we go out, create an Upwork account, and what do we do? What am I doing? I'm an attorney. What the hell does my profile look like on Upwork? What type of projects am I niche to be able to actually take?
Put aside the obvious, like if someone on Upwork posts like, I need an M&A lawyer to help me out, like take that off the table.
S&P
right?
focused
like,
M&A lawyer. Like
yeah. Like interestingly, I fit the profile. Like wow.
And if I'm going to Upwork to take those jobs, then I'm like That's weird. So that's not at all.
I mean,
Twitter is driving you guys plenty of work right now.
I was going to say, is Upwork better or worse than Twitter? I'm not.
That's the key question right there. That's what I want to know.
But I think it's a good one, right? Someone who has a skill set but is maybe not in love with their job. Say I don't like M&A, but this is what I've done for 13 years. Yeah. I'm really good at it. I've got the credentials. I've got the deal sheet. What else are you going to look at? And you don't have to get like super granular, but just like, what are the opportunities? What do you do to go kind of bridge and not throw away your skill set, but maybe start to transition to something?
It's a really interesting question, and I think this is the thing that like a lot of people have misconceptions on. The way I typically think about it is, if you've had a full-time job before, like you are qualified to consult for another company in that area or using skill sets that you used at the previous job. So for example, like I was talking to the guy relatively recently who like basically worked at a like venture group as like a very like entry-level job at a venture capitalist firm, basically. Yeah. And his job was like reviewing pitch decks and then sending pitch decks he liked to partners. And he's like, I have no skills. What can I do? And I was like, bro, like you literally review pitch decks all day long. Go sell how to making pitch decks for people. Like, you know what a good one looks like because you review them all day long. That you can absolutely go do that. Or I mean, that's where one specific niche example, like you can kind of extrapolate that a little bit more. Like if we just take a skill of like PowerPoint, for example, there's 1,000 jobs an hour posted. I'm like, hey, I need somebody to go make a PowerPoint for me for XYZ specific thing. I hire people to do that for me all the time because I need people to make PowerPoints for me. And a lot of people are like, hey, I am not a world expert at PowerPoint. It's like, well, my time right now, like I have zero time today to dedicate to making a PowerPoint. Like absolutely zero. So if I could find someone on Upwork who could do a average job, that average job is 1,000% better than what I could do because I'm not going to be able to get anything done. So I would gladly hire the average person right now at $50 an hour to do this for me because I'm in back-to-back meetings all day and like I can't get to it. And there's a million examples of that where a lot of the stuff on Upwork it's not things that are extremely technically complex or that client themselves actually can't do. It's, I don't have time to do it and I need to hire somebody to do it for me for that reason.
I love that.
You're leverage, basically. It's all leverage.
You take a job for $500 an hour and then you put it right back on Upwork for $250 of it. Is that?
I do it constantly. So I've got a network of about 20 to 30 freelancers that I have now hired on Upwork with niche specific skill sets. So if I need XYZ specific thing done, I'll send it to this guy. And I've got backup set up. So like my primary guy, I'll send it to my primary guy. My primary researcher, he's phenomenal. He's in Pakistan right now. And there's a lot going on in Pakistan right now. He doesn't have internet access. So like I have a backup person that I'm sending the research work to my backup person right now because my primary doesn't have internet access. And once he comes back online, like I'll send the work back to the primary guy. So like I've got people across skill sets and primaries and backups for all of it, which
it's genius though, right? Because if I can't get a job because I don't have any reviews, but you can get it done, then you can get it and sub it to me, and then you can give me a review.
Exactly. See, you must be a lawyer. Like you guys, exactly. Like that's the exact.
I play one on Twitter at least.
That's exactly the model. It's so like someone can take the job working for me to get a review, and then they've got their review, and then they can build their own pyramid.
But you can scale that way, though, right? I mean, you talked a minute ago about how you can't scale past 3 to 500. I mean, it feels like that changes that.
It's hard though. So 500 is like I think you can get to call it 200 to 300 by yourself. Then to get to 500, you need these freelancers underneath you supporting. It's really hard to get from 500 to say for $1 million because I'm basically the concert like guy who
you still have to manage your freelancers. Yeah,
exactly. And so it's quite a bit of work because I need to know, like I'm keeping a lot in my head right now about like who's doing what at what stage and when do they need to get back to me, and I need to get it back from person A at this point so I can send it to person B and like that sort of thing. The only way to really scale this beyond 500 is if I hire an alumni from MPB, that's going to cost me $250, 250 grand a year to do that, which kills my margin. And then I have to go sell more work. And very few independents have tried to scale their firm, and it doesn't really scale very well to like a boutique level. And the hours get worse, your income goes down. It's not a great outcome. I think what you guys are doing in law like works a lot better than what I'm doing. From, like,
see, I was going to respond and say everything you're saying is resonating heavily with me right now.
Okay. Interesting. Tell me more. More.
I mean, so the law, first of all, is a bad business, right? I mean, you can't have non-competes, you can't have non-solicits. It's very relationship heavy. It's antiquated practices. The ethics, prevent advertising and solicitation. It's an intentionally bad business. And, it's a service business, right? And scaling a service business in the first place is tough, but also the law is very equity driven, right? So everybody comes in thinking, hey, I'm going to be partner and I'm going to take equity in the firm. Well, the problem is you look at the average mid-sized US law firm, right? That has, let's say you're right on the edge of the AmLaw 200, which is the 200 largest law firms. Okay. You probably have 100 lawyers, and somebody or a group of people are managing those 100 lawyers, right? Which is a massive operation. It is an operation equivalent of any other 100 headcount SMB, which is very challenging. $50 million, $100 million enterprise value organization. The trick is law firms are not saleable. You can only sell them to lawyers, and they're not really scalable for the reasons that I just mentioned. So you're building the equivalent of $100 million SMB that if it was an accounting practice, an individual or a small group of individuals could someday get a liquidity event and make $100 million bucks. In the law firm, that's not the case. You've scaled a $100 million organization and you're still making 500 grand. And the moment you stop working and servicing clients is the moment the cash flow stops. Yeah. That's my vantage point. And frankly, we've tried some different things thinking, hey, let's see if we can break the mold. And every coach and consultant we talk to is like, no. They all tell us to do all the same traditional stuff. And so it's a little bit of a weird business. Yeah. Do you see it differently, Kevin? What's your take?
No, I think that's right. I think, and we've been having a lot of talks about this, like your scale is limited. Any business where revenue is tied to time, even at scale, is going to be limited from commoditized products, right? In terms of its growth potential, right? Like if you're selling a widget, you can likely scale several multiples with the same team before you're having to incur additional overhead and additional people and things like that. That's not the same in time services-based businesses, right? The additional overhead comes at a very, very low multiple to top line revenue. And it makes figuring out how to scale a services-based business like that difficult. So yeah, no, I mean, I see it exactly the same way. It's tough to grapple with as you try and rethink the model because there's so much bad about the business of law. But like the deeper you get in, you start to have these realizations of like, oh, well, now I see why they've done it that way for 150 years. Yeah. And I hate it. And there's got to be a better way. But the struggle to figure that out is difficult.
I think the only differentiator between what you described and what we have is we have massive barriers to entry, right? It's very challenging. Yes. There are some suspect actors in our marketplace that like people are giving business to that they probably shouldn't be. So, once you've crossed the regulatory barrier, we have pretty low barriers to entry for quality of individual. Yeah. There's no Upwork style ranking system. I wish there was, so you could see that some of these guys are like 15-year career prosecutor that now all of a sudden is like, doing M&A, like not a good idea, but clients don't know that because they don't know M&A and they do it once in their life. Yeah. That's it. So, we suffer from a little bit of the same thing, but not to the same extent. Are you worried at all, Sean, about being deplatformed? I mean, you're really heavily tied to Upwork, it sounds like. What happens if Upwork blows up or throws you off, or what do you do then?
Yeah, so Upwork, I think, is the launch ground. Like Upwork is where you learn where 90% of people should start, because it's where they learn like how to sell work to a client, how to negotiate price, how to handle a client who's unhappy, like that sort of thing. Upwork doesn't scale though. Like you got to get off Upwork after call it 3 to 6 months. So for me, yeah, well, I think that's at the point where like you've reached like escape velocity, basically, where you've learned everything you could, and you're at the highest possible peak income you can make there. That's when you kind of bounce to a different platform. You can use your network, you can use LinkedIn. Like there's a lot of different ways to find independent consulting work. So I guess the short answer is I'm not terribly worried by it, because like eventually you kind of bounce out of it. It's kind of like your paid training ground.
So you're well past Upwork then at this point.
I mean, I personally haven't taken a project on Upwork in years. I spend a ton of money through Upwork each year hiring my network of freelancers.
Yeah.
But I'm not hiring. I'm not doing my work on Upwork anymore now.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Got it.
So let's just looking at the clock. Let's pivot for a second, if you don't mind, Eric. I'm curious to get back to sort of the entrepreneurial journey, then less nuts and bolts of consulting. But I want to talk a little bit more about your transition. I mean, you did traditional like big consulting, you did startup world. Now you're entrepreneur. You know, what does life for Sean in 2023 look like as compared to life for Sean? I don't know what year it was, right? But like back at BCG, for example.
So much better, man.
It was a leading question.
It's a leading question, and you knew where the answer was going to be, but it's worth reiterating for that person who's driving home and like hates what they were doing at the office today. Like, yeah, like life gets so much better on the back end. Like big consulting,
we keep saying the person driving home. If there really is somebody listening to this, they're like, at this point, they're like, guys, like, leave me alone. You know,
they're like, guys, I was seen for a minute. Now I feel stalked.
Yeah, I feel highly annoyed. Sorry, please continue, Sean.
Yeah, no, it's a good ad. Yeah, so it's funny because like, so in big consulting, you travel Monday through Thursday. Like you're on the road every single week, which is really cool when you're young and in your 20s and whatever. And like my first day with my now wife was a free weekend down in Miami, South Beach with her, because like we had the points and it was great. Yeah. So like you could do really cool stuff with it. But on the back end, like it's kind of terrible. Like I had one manager who was a night owl, so he's like, we're only taking the 11:45 flight back to Chicago every week. And I was like, you're killing me, man. Like we would land at like 1 a.m. and there's like one guy.
That means you're working more too, right? Because you're working, presumably you're still working those evening hours also.
Yeah, you work more hours. It's just the whole thing was kind of a mess, but it's awesome now. Like I've got a almost 3-year-old. We go walks in the morning. We call them buddy walks. It's great. I make him pancakes in the morning. Like, and I'm making more money. I'm working less hours, and I get to spend time with my kids. Like it's kind of hard to beat this like solopreneur path, to use the Justin Welsh term, or like creating a like boutique firm like you guys have done. Like, I mean, assuming your lives are a lot better than they were back in Big Law.
I mean, comparatively to Big Law, sure, right?
We both take a deep breath. Oh, Sean.
Well, we've got a lot on our plate, right? Because we've got legal work to do and a business to run, which is 2 jobs, effectively. But unquestionably, right? Like the distinction is Big Law and I think big corporate generally is it's unpredictable. It's outside your control. There's no ability to say no. There's no flexibility. You know, I woke up yesterday and my wife and my 4-year-old were sick, like really sick. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm not going to the office today. You know, I office up the street and I stayed home.
Good luck doing that in corporate.
Yeah, there's no way. You know what I'm saying? There's just no way I could, all of a sudden I'm just going to decide to work from my living room, you know, and take care of my kids. Like it would put a lot more stress on them. And, you know, and there's days where it's just like, okay, if I want to take a day off, I take a day off, and it is what it is. We have client demands and we, you know, hit deadlines and meet them and whatever else. And we've got people to answer to. I think I always tweet about people's interest in time control. You know, there's this big thrust towards, I want my life back. I'm sick of sitting in traffic. I'm sick of being told what to do. And I always get the pushback where it's like, being an entrepreneur does not mean total control of your time. You know, like if anything, it's more work. And the answer is like, yeah, I mean, obviously, like you, especially now it's all up to you, right? Like the institution that you used to, you know, be a part of was self-sustaining. you're an individual. And if it fails, if you fail, it fails and your income fails. So obviously that is a different thing, right? But you also have complete control. If I don't want to take a client, I don't like the way they're talking to me, or I don't like what they're asking from me, or I don't think that the work is in the right place, I just say no, and I don't have to check with anybody. Right? Kevin doesn't check with me. We don't check with the other members of our firm. We treat each other with respect and we do what we got to do. But, we've got that level of life autonomy back. And, going home on Friday, right, and knowing that no matter what happens this weekend, nobody's telling me anything, If a client needs something, like, I'll take care of business, But it used to be, I had a partner in Big Law actually once and said, I asked him the question point blank. I said, how do you deal with the unpredictability of it? And he said, I used to have like Saturday afternoon plans, and I'd spend kind of all week thinking about it. Like, am I going to make it? Am I going to make it? Am I going to make it? And he's like, and then one day you just kind of stop making the plans. And
and you're like, wait, no, that's backward.
That's not the answer, That's the answer. That's your answer.
Killed her, man.
He started like it was like the solution. And you know what? For his life, to each their own, that's great for him. Yeah. He's wildly successful. He makes tons of money. He's seemingly happy. The same guy, though, I will tell you, we got a Christmas card. I tweeted about this Christmas card once. We get the Christmas card. It's this long update about the family. I wish I still had it. Maybe we took a picture of it because it was noteworthy. And it's like the daughters are doing this, the wife is doing that. And then at the very end, in like because it was one of those like Noel, Noel. And then like at the very end of the L, it was like, and Rob has been servicing his clients in mergers and acquisitions transactions, or like something like this very, like it was written by her. She doesn't even really
put it on the tombstone, man. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. Like he was just actually like your footnote earlier that you talked about. Like he was like a footnote in his family's yearly update, and it was sad. Like that.
That's sad.
Reading it was a palatable feeling of sadness for this man.
It's kind of the same. I mean, people ask me all the time, like, so are you like way less stressed now that you work for yourself and stuff? And I'm like, no, not at all. Right. Like all the stress is there. If not, it's a little more stressful, right? Because like my family's counting on like everything going right, but it's so different than that type. And I mean, going down the like story lane, before I left Big Law, like one of my last straws, it was a birthday weekend. We had a charity event that we piggybacked off of that my wife was working. And so we like made a weekend about it. We literally scheduled one thing. We had a weekend to like do whatever, but timing was open. I knew I had a deal going on. We had one thing scheduled, and the client, of course, wanted to talk on Saturday, and communicating with the partner, when can we have this call? I was like, hey, I can make any time work. This was literally my birthday. I can make any time work except, 1 to 2 o'clock or whatever it was, because we've got something planned. And I literally got an email back 2 minutes later of like, oh, we won't have left I don't remember what it was, right? But like, we won't have gotten on the road from the ranch yet. So that time doesn't, other times don't work. We're going to have to do it at 1 o'clock. And I had to cancel like the one thing my wife planned. And I'm like that is such a different type of stress.
It is.
That's just like, I'm not interested. I don't mind the pressure of having to perform for my clients. I do mind the pressure of having to answer to someone with unreasonable expectations when it's not like fundamentally moving the deal in an important way. Anyway,
I mean, let's quantify it then, right? Like, so you guys are running your own business right now. Like, let's say you make like 1x. What would the multiple have to be for you to go back and take a job at 2x, or a job for you at Big Law? Would it be 2x? Would it be 10x? Like, just so people understand, because like both are stressful. It sounds like. How to quantify the difference?
Well, I think that's what's so interesting and why I love this conversation about like taking a skill set to monetize independently. Like, I mean, you could make up some like stupid number and say 1,000x. Like, I'd go back for 1,000x, right?
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
But in realistic terms, I really don't think there's a multiple, because I would rather make $400,000 for the rest of my life and own my schedule, my time with my wife, my time with my kids, what I'm doing on the weekend, what clients I'm taking, then go make $2 million reporting to someone, having to cancel the birthday plans, having to not make Saturday. Like at some point you get to a level, and like we're talking from like a ridiculous place of privilege, and I get that, right? But when you get to that point, right, the return's just not there for me. I mean, the multiple would have to be so stupid to give this up.
But Kevin, I think it's broader than that though, right? Because the old adage is like the person who's been self-employed like becomes unemployable. And it's true, right? Like if you're actually an entrepreneur, and not everybody is, right? Like you should go do something before you endeavor to be an entrepreneur. You should go do something like a culture index or one of these things. We did a culture index and I thought it was fantastic. I was skeptical going in, and I think we all kind of were blown away, like almost needed like a cigarette afterwards to take the edge off. It was so intense, you know? So I do think like before you endeavor to do something like this, you should certainly, you know, find out whether or not you're that type of person. And maybe only through the experience can you really understand it. But once you know that, hey, I'm an entrepreneur, like I need that control. Like I can't be like, I as an individual can no longer be in an institution. Like you can't put me in a chair and tell me to be there from 9 to 5 and tell me that my income is going to be $100. And no matter what I do, it's not going to be 99. It's not going to be 101. Like I will die, not physically, but I will die spiritually in that job. And so that job could be a, you know, $1 million a year gig, and I will be dying spiritually and be totally unfulfilled in the role. And that sounds crazy to say, but I really think that that's just the person that you are. And when you see people who are entrepreneurs as W-2s, they really struggle, and they've got a lot of career movement. They've got a lot of different places on their resume, and it looks chaotic because they're searching for something within the W-2 institution because they're afraid that they don't realize actually doesn't exist within the institution. It exists within yourself, and that's the having the self-drive. And I really need to know when I wake up in the morning that I have unlimited potential. And that gets me going. If you told me, hey, Eric, like in Big Law, it was like very high income. You know, we had like a couple $100,000 a year. And then a really big bonus, like in, you know, your later years, it's 100,000 plus at the end of the year. It wasn't enough for me to know that no matter what I do for 12 months, that the only upside is going to be this one tranche of cash at the end of the year. Like on a quarterly basis, on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, like getting out of the bed and feeling motivated to like get on a call at 11 p.m. on Sunday night and take down a distressed energy company. Like it just didn't, it was, I was dying spiritually. And I didn't realize that until I got out. So anyways, I'm over talking, but the short answer is there's just no amount of money. There really isn't.
What about you, Sean? If McKinsey comes calling, like what's the number?
Sean's like 200. I do 200.
That's a drop, man. I don't know. I have the similar answer where like I don't think there is. And I ask this question actually quite a lot to people who've been in similar shoes as us for a while. And the answer is almost always like, they give me $1 billion. Like, yeah, I'm like, if there's something nonsensical, I'm going to do it. But the answer is almost always like, it's not worth it for me. And I think the underlying message through all of it is there's a point at which people reach a level of financial success as an independent consultant, as lawyers, as whatever it is, where they're in control of their time and they're making enough that they are comfortable and their family is comfortable, where they're like, you know what, like there's no number where it's worth giving up. They've almost detached themselves from the idea of wanting money and wanting more. So for example, like, so I went to Wharton, like really, really good business school. I won a couple awards while I was there for like various things, but basically the reason why that matters is for about 18 months, I was the school's like poster child of like, here's one of our cool students. So when like the billionaire donors and the like Fortune 500 CEOs came to school, like I was the poster child student they trotted out to go meet those people and be like, look at our great students, write us a check. So like I spent a lot of time.
Why was that, Sean? What was the element that they liked about you?
There's like one program that the school is known for. It's a class called Management 100, where it's basically students consult for a local nonprofit, and there's a big long thing. But I was one of like the team advisors for that, and I was the highest ranked in the program, and then the highest ranked in Wharton's history. So like a lot of context, but basically, like, I was the poster child because of the rankings from the Management 100 program. And what was interesting is when I was there, when I was a student, I would meet these people and I would be like, you know what? Like, I saw that guy on CNBC last week. He's a smart guy, interesting guy, saying cool things. But now that I've spent a dinner sitting across the table with him, talking with him, like, I think I can hang with him. Like, I think I can be him. Like, I didn't think he was so ridiculously impressive that I just couldn't do it if I put in the hours, put in the work. Shit, I want to try to do this. I want to try to be a CEO. I want to try to be a billionaire entrepreneur. I want to try to do all these things. And then you actually start seeing like what the work that is involved to do so, the exact thing that we're talking about here. And you're like, you know what? Like, the trade-off for going for that is not actually worth it compared to making an income where my family's comfortable and taking buddy walks with my son in the morning. Like, there's no price tag that's actually worth it for me to try to make that jump, even though that's how I thought I wanted to do. And I had examples that would be like, hey, I think I could try to make that jump.
Interesting. So what I mean, the question I wanted to ask, and I think it dovetails nicely on that point, Sean, is talk to a second that person in the car, right? That's driving home from.
Dude, if that person in the car is still commuting after all this time,
they're doing it wrong.
They really need to be listening to this conversation.
Yeah, that is, driving home from a $60,000 a year career. That's hearing this Wharton grad or this Michigan and Duke law grad talking about 6-figure salaries and like, yeah, just go consult and you don't need $1 million because you can make $400,000. That's just like, you guys are out of your damn minds, right? Like, I've been repairing HVAC systems for the last 9 years. I'm burnt out. I can't even afford a new car payment, let alone turn down $1 million job. Like, right. This is clearly not for me, right? I can never go do Upwork and consult. I can never go be an entrepreneur. Talk to a little bit of that demographic shift and how you kind of address those concerns of like, you don't have to have the McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group or Kirkland and Ellis law background to like really make a difference in your financial and professional life like this.
Yeah. I mean, in my mind, to improve your financial position, like at the end of the day, it all comes down to making more money, right? Like the median income, we referenced it earlier, it's in the $50,000 range. Like, step one is make more money. And okay, how do you do that? There's 3 different ways. Way number 1 is you start making more money at work, which means you get a raise or a promotion. And it's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5% a year if you're lucky. Like, very hard to materially and quickly increase your income there. Path number 2 is to upskill and get new skills. Do something like Bloom Tech or something like that. Learn to code and get a completely different job in a completely different industry that just pays a lot more. Incredibly time intensive. There's cost associated with that. And like, coding is not for everyone. It's not for me, that's for sure. So there's structural problems with that one. Or path number 3 is, what can you do today to find a way to make some extra money on the side? And if you're making $60,000 a year and you want to get to 6 figures, like, okay, you need to make $40,000 extra a year to do that. Like, we're talking, that's $3,333 a month extra that you need to make. Like, okay, what can you do to get to that point? For me, like, I went on Upwork. Yes, I had some labels on my name. That being said, my first jobs were proofreading emails. It was the immediate jobs. I was proofreading emails. Okay. And like, that's what I was doing. And I was proofreading emails for business owners who didn't speak English, or English wasn't their first language. Like, there's literally close to 1 billion people in this world who are qualified for that job because English was their first language. So taking the path of like, how can I make an extra $3,000 on the side? And then like, what are some things that I can do to do that? For me, it was Upwork. Sweaty Startup has a lot of other thoughts on what are some things that he could do and people can do to make money on the side. But if those are your 3 different paths, I think that option number 3, make the $3,000 on the side, is the easiest way to do it. I
love that. Absolutely love that.
Kevin, your question is such a good one though, because we have to always remember that I had a buddy that I was having a conversation recently with about financially, and I said to him point, I said, honestly, man, it sounds like you need to make more money. That's the solution. Like, you just need to make more money. And he looked at me, he was like, I don't want to. He was like, I would have to give something up for that, and I don't want to give up my time, and I want to enjoy more of my time. So, nope. And like my head was like, boom! Like I wasn't programmed for that response, Like, what do you mean? So yeah. Anyways, important element of the discussion here.
Yeah.
Sean, I love ChatGPT. Or I do on Twitter at least.
It gets the Twitter hives going.
Yeah, it kicks the beehive. It's cross discipline tweeting. But anyways, I love the idea of it. It's a very useful tool. How is it? This feels like the category or one category in particular that is highly susceptible to impact from AI. Like, one, are you seeing that? And two, how do you exploit it? How do we take advantage of it?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was interviewed by Forbes actually about this like a week or so ago on like how AI would impact it. Yeah, it was a fun conversation. So there's a lot of different cuts to it. I actually don't think AI is going to be that relevant in the higher paying areas in the consulting space. There's certainly spaces where it could be. For example, my first jobs were proofreading emails. Like I would imagine ChatGPT can do that as well, if or not better than I could at a much lower cost. But something like, I don't know, SAP data cleaning for a consolidation of two different plants from an M&A activity, like that is not going to be done by ChatGPT. Like you screw up your SAP data and then you are in a world of hurt. So like those higher paying jobs, I think are going to be fine. Where I think people have been using ChatGPT pretty effectively is to get rid of the like slow day-to-day like minutia of consulting. Like for example, I talk about like communication with your clients important, like email updates, here's what's going on, here's the plan for the next couple of days, roadblocks, that sort of thing. Like I know some consultants who spend like an hour or two a day just drafting emails of like, here's where I'm at. That feels like easy loading for ChatGPT.
Yeah. It's, the use cases are, I have mixed reviews. I think it's fantastic for some things like that. It's not quite the deep thinker that they want you to think it is yet. Yeah. And I believe wholeheartedly it'll get there, but we'll see. We got a request from Bloomberg Law for an interview on ChatGPT as well. So the big publications are also wanting to cross-discipline engagement bait. So fun times.
Well, it's also an interesting dovetail in our last conversation too, because I love your point, and I think it's absolutely true that it's going to affect different layers and sectors of the labor market. And as folks start to tap into that and use it to their advantage, that's one of those tools that can move you higher in that labor market, right? Away from some of the skills that ChatGPT may be replacing, where you can use ChatGPT as an enhancement to kind of increase your profile. Because there's stuff it's not going to replace, right? Like they talk about AI making legal oral arguments. Like at the end of the day, if you're in a jury trial like that, I mean, who knows?
I don't
We're
want my
getting way
jail
too
time
philosophical.
dependent on AI.
Maybe AI gets there, but you have to have that ability to storytell and use body language in front of a jury, right? Like they're just, anyway.
That's a great use case though, because it can spot logical fallacies. There's been a few instances where I've been having tweet conversations and I'll put my response in and I'll say, are there any logical fallacies in this response? And it'll tell me that it's an overgeneralization or, an ad hominem. I get a lot of ad hominem. I'm kidding. Sort of. But yeah, it can actually spot those. So it's like a really clever assistant. Yeah. But Sean, you're big on YouTube, man. One, tell us about your social media strategy, and then two, plug your YouTube.
Yeah. So social media strategy, YouTube, honestly, the whole thing has been like an accident. There was no clear strategy to any of it. One of the killer downsides of what I'm doing, the solo consulting thing, is like, I don't have colleagues that I chat with on a day-to-day basis, really. I've got clients, but that's different. So like Twitter was literally just like my colleagues. It was the equivalent of me shooting the shit with the guys around the water cooler. That's like literally what it was. And then it just kind of started growing. And I was like, all right, so I'll tweet a little bit more and try to share like more structured framework around what I'm doing. YouTube was also kind of like a fun hobby type thing. I'll give you the actual like legit story on it. Catalent, which is one of the platforms that I do consulting through, they raised a bunch of money. They hired a fancy PR firm that was trying to get articles like about Catalent written, and some of those national public, you've probably seen the articles that are like, this 26-year-old is making $300 an hour doing like this XYZ thing. Catalent was trying to get those articles written about themselves. And they asked me to be the person who was like featured in the articles, and the publications passed because it was basically a puff piece for Catalent. But what was interesting was they asked for my tax returns to verify my income. And I was like, holy shit, these articles are way more legit than I ever thought they were, because they're verifying it with tax returns. So I had one of my freelancers go through, scrape all of the articles, and basically plot like how much everyone is making and how many hours they're working. And I filtered on like lowest hours, highest income. And like the top 10 were all YouTubers. I was like, shit, like I'm gonna make use of YouTube videos for fun. Like, why not? And I was like, and the worst case scenario, it's a fun hobby. And the best case scenario, it makes me a ton of money. It's more fun hobby than anything else really at this point. But
Kevin,
it's cool because it has upside.
Note to self here. Let's put this on YouTube.
Absolutely.
So well, I guess we don't need to get too much into YouTube, the business of YouTube, but that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Is that your biggest priority, would you say, outside of actually doing the consulting work, is growing a YouTube channel, or what are you trying to do?
Biggest priority number one is family by far. Number two, consulting. Number two is consulting and my existing clients. Number three is helping people on the getting started in consulting, which sometimes that's Twitter, sometimes it's newsletter, sometimes it's YouTube. I'm still experimenting to try to figure out what that is. Like I told you guys earlier, like I want to run that scrape where it'd be like $100 million was made with people on Upwork. I'm experimenting on how to do that in a bigger group setting. So on the YouTube side of things, like I have that video of the guy who went from 0 to 100 grand in 50 days. I've done that actually 4 times now. That was the only one that we filmed, but I've done that quite a bit. So like I know it's a repeatable process. I know how to get someone in a one-on-one setting to big money on consulting. What I don't know how to do it is in a group setting. So actually right before this call, I was on a phone call of 6 people where I'm trying to do it in a group setting and get people to their first 10 grand in like 10 days or something like that. And we'll see if I can successfully do it there. And eventually I'm just going to try to keep scaling up until I can figure out how to do it, probably through social media in a larger scale setting.
I love it. I love it. And then priority number 6 is convincing your wife to move to Hawaii. So there's that.
That's the plan. That's the plan. Honestly, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it'll be, if I had to guess, it's going to be Charleston. That's most likely. But Hawaii would be pretty sweet. Charleston's probably what it's going to end up being.
Yeah, it's another great place. Well, I guess we'll wrap up, Sean. Anything that you want to plug, promote, talk about? Feel free to have the stage for a second.
No plugs, no promo. I don't really make money doing any of this. This is just kind of fun stuff for me. So if you want to get in touch, send me a DM on Twitter and I'll eventually get back to it. There's quite a few in there, but I'll eventually get back to it.
What's your handle, Sean?
At Sean O'Dowd 15, I think. I don't actually know why it was 15, but I'm Sean O'Dowd 15 on Twitter.
Awesome.
There were 14 Sean O'Dowds that beat you, maybe.
Yeah. Something like that.
They've already scaled up. Thanks for being on, Sean.
Yeah, guys, awesome chat.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mundane Millionaires. If you enjoyed what you heard in this episode, make sure to follow Mundane Millionaires wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. See you next time.